into Crystal Ball college football. So there was a big story headline this week, right? Matt Rhule fired Carolina Panthers this week. And obviously, the enormous speculation is he's going back to college football, right? He's going to become a head coach somewhere. And that's it. That's going to happen. We have some jobs open throughout the landscape of college football. So he's probably going to take one of those jobs. And that's very possible. But there's some other options as well. I've heard people talk about, he could just go on TV for a year. And that's possible as well. But I think a good place to start is the fact that he's going to make $834,000 the next 48 months, regardless if he coaches in college football or if he stays or if he goes on TV, he's making that money. And so for him, I think it's just massive where he's got options now. Because if he goes to college football, he's making the same amount of money regardless because it replaces the contract at Carolina. And then if he goes on TV, then he can just kind of double up on his salary. So I'm going to be very curious to see what he decides to do. But today, we're going to act as if he wants to coach college football again. And I think it's important to start with kind of who is Matt Rhule? What is Matt Rhule? What has he done at the college level that would warrant so many programs being excited about him and potentially hiring him? And I think you start at Temple, you start at Baylor, right? And these are two places where he came in, changed a culture, and turned those programs into a conference champion in Temple and a national championship contender in Baylor. You know, Baylor was a win away from being in the college football playoff, or at least right on the edge of that, at least being in the top 5. And at Temple, they won a conference championship after being really bad his first year there and really bad before him getting there. At Baylor, obviously the scandal, they were scandal riddled. He comes in, they go 1-11, make a bowl the next year, then make the Big 12 championship the next year. So he clearly has this ability to go into a place and fix whatever culture problems there may be and turning that team into a program that can actually win. And I think that's key, right? Because most programs that are looking to hire, unless there's a retirement or something, crazy like that happens, you want someone to come in who's going to build a culture. And I think that's key with him. And that's something he can absolutely do. I think the other part to mention about Matt that is so key to what he was able to do in his stops at Baylor and Temple is his ability to recruit and evaluate talent and then develop that talent. And I think at times you see from some of these places that are looking for new hirings, they're not finding guys that fit their scheme and they're not finding guys with high ceilings. And I think that's a problem. Matt definitely wants guys with high ceilings. They're even doing that in the NFL. When he was at Carolina, they were, drafting guys who had these enormous ceilings like Brian Burns, just an athletic freak who you're going to develop and turn into an all-NFL type guy. And so now that's what he wants to do at the college level. So I think you're going to see him want to be able to go to a place where he feels like he can recruit that area and where the recruiting landscape is very fertile, where he can find guys who are maybe hidden gems that he can develop into the kind of players that he wants at his school, wherever that may be. So I think looking through some of these schools that are on the list, and I think it's important to mention that most of the time, it seems like Matt is looking for a place where he can go in and have ultimate job security. He did that. He got that at Temple, got that at Baylor, and then got that at Carolina, to be honest. They just could never find a quarterback at Carolina. But, he had job security like crazy. He signed a 7-year deal. That's really unheard of in the NFL for a guy that had never coached in the NFL before, as far as actually having a head coaching role in the NFL. He'd been on staffs, but he'd never had that role. And really in college, it's not like he won a national championship and then moved on, or that he won a Power 5 championship and then moved on. It was kind of one of those years he had a great year at Baylor and then got hired. So now I think he's looking for a place where he can come in and instill a culture, but also not have this crazy expectation. And that's why number 5 on my list for Matt Rhule is Auburn. I don't see him going to Auburn. I just don't see it. And it all comes down to stability and the coaching longevity that you can have at Auburn. And while it's a great job as far as it being in the SEC, so you know that the conference is going to be there forever, so that stability is nice, their expectations are through the roof. You're not going to have a long leash, and you're having to play in the SEC West every year. And maybe there'll be pods in the future when Texas and Oklahoma join, But right now, I just don't think that's a winning formula. And they're not going to sit back and allow you to just go through this long rebuild. So they're number 5 on my list. Number 4, Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech feels, and I don't want to say it is Baylor because it's not Baylor. I think Baylor's a better program than Georgia Tech, but it gives off that same feel, right? That same vibe of, hey, it's in a very fertile recruiting ground state. You're right there in Atlanta. You know, you have this recruiting pipeline. You're going to be able to find hidden gems all over the place. And it's a school that's not going to have these crazy expectations on you. My only issue with Georgia Tech is the ceiling there. The ceiling's just not very high, even if you're able to recruit like that. I know Paul Johnson had things going, but I don't see it in this current landscape. I don't think they're going to compete with NIL enough, and I don't think that that's going to be the place that he wants to go unless he's looking for a monster rebuild, because that's exactly what Georgia Tech is. Third on my list is Arizona State. Recruiting land, very fertile, but they don't have much recent success, and the fact of the matter is I don't know how seriously they take football. And that's a little bit of an issue for me, especially in the Pac-12 where there's not a lot of conference stability there either. I just don't know that that's a great fit for Matt Rhule, and I don't see that being an option, but it is third on my list because I do think there's a little bit of a ceiling at Arizona State if you're actually able to hit on some things. Second school, Wisconsin. This would be a lot of fun. I think recruiting-wise, he would have a field day because he'd get to recruit a lot of projects. That's what Wisconsin builds on. Recent history of winning, I think, is big as well. And I think they'll give you a pretty long commitment. My only issue here is I don't think they'll hire him. I think Jim Leonard is kind of the guy they're sitting there waiting for to hire, even though I think they should consider some other options as well. I think Matt would fit in really well there and do really well at Wisconsin. But the number 1 team is Nebraska. It just makes too much sense because it has the same recruiting area as Wisconsin for the most part. You're going to be able to find guys who are hidden gems. You're going to be able to find guys who have elite measurables. You're going to be able to build a program the way you want to build it because you're going to have a long leash. You're going to get to come in, fix a culture, which he's going to be able to do there. And then you're also going to have crazy support. I think Nebraska is going to be one of the probably top 5 NIL teams in the Big Ten, even when USC and UCLA get there. They'll be up there. They won't be as high as Ohio State or USC, but I think they could be in the mix in the top 5. And that kind of support, I think, is massive. I also think Nebraska's right around being a big brand program. You know, they have history and all that. And so I understand why you would say, hey, they're a big brand. I think they're an appealing brand for Matt Rhule. I also think the Big Ten piece of it, which is why I mentioned Nebraska and Wisconsin, is very appealing to him. He played at Penn State. That makes a lot of sense. That kind of football makes a lot of sense as well. So I think Nebraska is the best fit for him if he wants to go back to the college game right now. Wouldn't shock me, though. Take a year off, wait for some maybe bigger jobs. Maybe even the Penn State job opens up for Matt Rhule. Kind of doubt it the way they're playing this year, but who knows? You can't really tell the future in college football. Everything is so unpredictable. But that's it. That's my take on Matt Rhule. Very curious to see what happens. He could be a guy who could go in and change a program and really be great for a program, and it might be Nebraska, which is currently number 1 on my rankings. But thanks for listening today. This has been Crystal Ball College Football.